to the Star Command podcast. I'm David Seymour, and this is my good friend Alan Bragg, the star of the Star Command, and I am the command of the Star Command. And we are what? What are we, Alan? Like we're 1 week away from the start of college football season, and about 3 weeks away from the start of the NFL season. So it's a good time to start a little preview show. Get us ready and pumped for the upcoming seasons. Let's start with talking about the college football realignment. We've got the ACCs now at 17 schools, with Cal, SMU, and Stanford joining. The Big Ten's now at 18 schools.
Is it 18? I thought it was 14.
No, they're at 18 with Oregon, USC, and Washington coming in. Big 12 is now at 16 schools, with Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah joining. The Pac-12 is down to the Pac-2. Washington State and Oregon State are the only two that have
Which is
stayed
interesting,
in.
right? Holding on to that too.
Right.
The Pac-2, very interesting.
And then the SEC gets two new schools with Texas and Oklahoma. Me personally, I think that the biggest takeaway is that the Big Ten is going to get watered down. I think all of the constant travel from East Coast to West Coast. I think it's actually gonna be quite taxing on these kids, and trying to figure out this new schedule, a new travel schedule. I think we end up with a watered down Big Ten.
I agree. I thought it was 14 teams, so it's already watered me down by saying it's 18. I got to do some more research on that. And yeah, working through looking at their schedule, their big games. They have so many big games. And these teams start getting into the three losses, and you're not making the playoffs, and we'll talk about our playoff predictions later. And I have two Big Ten teams in there for that reason. I just think that they're gonna, the elite, the Ohio State's gonna be there. I think Oregon again is gonna, and who knows what Michigan, Penn State, all those guys do, but they're just gonna beat up on each other.
Right.
And related to what you're saying, that travel is going to be crazy, right? All the California teams, West Coast heading up to the Midwest. Yeah, it's very taxing on them. And
right, time difference. I've done a lot of traveling, so the fatigue from one coast to the other is a real thing when you're talking 3 hours behind, 2 hours behind. Everything, your whole schedule and the way you operate completely changes.
We see it in the NFL. You get a West Coast team going to the East Coast for an early kickoff, they're likely to lose that game. It's good to bet on that loss for that team.
Right.
Same thing, East Coast traveling to West Coast. It's a lot, and those are paid professionals.
Right. So I don't think that the ACC is really going to be affected, right? SMU, Stanford, Cal, they've just not been good teams of recent.
SMU's on my list, though, to look out for. SMU's got, per ESPN, they got the easiest schedule this year out of the Power Four. Another one of we'll get into the playoff predictions later, but SMU's a dark horse because I think the ACC is down. I think they can really go in there with a good, solid roster and put up some wins against teams that are typically, upper tier. But the ACC is definitely going to have a down year, in my opinion.
Most definitely. I like Texas going into the SEC. It'll be interesting to see with the amount of players that they lost this offseason. Both their big D tackles left and went to the pros. Both of their top wide receivers left and went to the pros. And I'm cautious because of Quinn Ewers, right? He has not made it through an entire NFL season or college football season healthy yet. And now you're going up against these big dogs that really play defense and hit hard. Arch Manning is waiting in the fold, and all the reports that I've heard is that he looks good and should probably be the starting quarterback. I don't think Oklahoma is going to be very successful, though. They lost Dylan Gabriel, went over to Oregon this year. So they're out of quarterback, and I don't ever see them playing tough like the SEC plays. last 2 years, Brent Venables, and we can talk about him later on when we start talking about coaches that could be on the hot seat. But he's had really strong starts and really poor finishes his first 2 years as the head coach. I think Texas with Sarkisian having spent time at Alabama and coaching in the SEC already, I think will kind of give him a little bit of a leg up. He knows what it takes, and I think Texas is really in their recruiting the last few years has been building towards joining the SEC. So they've been recruiting D linemen and offensive linemen and the things that are needed to survive in the Southeastern Conference, because it is a different ball game down here.
Absolutely. If you could rewind it 10 years, 8 years, 5 years ago, Oklahoma would have been the one, right? That you would say, man, they're going to come in and make their mark on the SEC. And that tide's turned in the past 3 years. Texas has really flipped the switch and recruiting, and they're ready. I got some big games to look forward. So Oklahoma, it's got 8 of its SEC opponents are ranked. They're not used to that.
No.
They're used to being 30-point favorites going into the majority of their season, and they're going to be underdogs.
Yes.
Probably at least 50% of games. And that's huge. Their biggest game, other than, of course, all the ranked, they've got Alabama. They play Alabama in Norman. It'd be a late November 23rd game, so it's, where are you at that point? Are you really competing to be a top tier SEC team? Has the season beaten you down? Because Georgia's coming to town November 23rd, not to mention your matchup with Texas, still. But Texas is interesting because they've got 2 of their 8 SEC teams are ranked. But however, they got the 2 big matchups with old Southwest Conference opponents, to A&M and Arkansas. And both of those games, they've got A&M's in College Station, Arkansas's in Fayetteville. So you can say what you throw out the records at that point. That's old rivals. They want to beat Texas, and they got them at home. So make that a ranked game,
Yes.
Both of those.
And College Station is by far one of the toughest environments to play in all of college football. The 12th man, Kyle Field is up there in the places you do not want to have to travel to. So
yeah, it's something when those fans get swaying, right?
Yeah, most definitely. And the other thing about the Texas A&M thing is, if you remember, Texas A&M was in the Big 12 and left the SEC the moment Texas got its own network. When they got the Longhorn Network and they felt like that the money situation wasn't quite fair enough, they took off to greener pastures in the SEC. Kind of felt they left Texas behind in the dust. A&M's got a new coach. They just fired Jimbo Fisher, paid the man $70-some-odd million to go away, essentially. And so they have a lot to prove, especially with Texas coming back. They've played the little brother in that state for so long, and then that move to the SEC was their chance to get away from it and maybe try to outshine the Longhorns a little bit. So that'll be a game that everybody's looking at when it comes across the schedule. The whole state of Texas is ready for that game.
Absolutely. But yeah, that's huge. Those 2 teams coming to the SEC, can't wait. I mean, it just makes every week, the every game is huge.
So that kind of really covers the college football realignment. I do think real quick on that is I think Utah has a real shot to win the Big 12. They play a physical style of football that the Big 12 doesn't usually see. You think of the Big 12, you don't think of defense, really. You think of high-scoring, high-powered offense.
Spread it out, sling it around, absolutely, yeah.
And that's really what the Pac-12 was, too. But Utah made its name in the Pac-12 by being that bust-you-in-the-mouth football. They came to hit you in the mouth every time they came. And gave a lot of teams in the Pac-12 problems. They've won the Pac-12 a couple of times with that style of football. And I think that they have a real shot at winning the Big 12 this year is a new team in a new conference.
I like that. I do.
So speaking of conference champions, so I'm not, I was doing some research on this 12 team playoff, right? And it talked about the 5 conference champions getting automatic bids, right? And so whoever the lowest ranked conference champion is, right, is going to fall where they rank, and then the top 4 conference champions are obviously going to get bye weeks. My question is the Pac-12 still consider? Are we still going to be following those rules since those rules were made while the Pac-12 was going?
So I don't think so because it's only referring to the Power Four now. The Power Five is no more. So
Okay,
just referring to the Power Four. You got, the ones we just talked about, minus the
right,
Pac Two. So it's
right,
gone. So
yeah.
that
Because
I
I
guess
mean, you
so that'd be
can't
your top
consider
4
it.
seeds. So then you'd have your top 4 seeds would all be conference championships, and I'm learning something here. So those would be your 1, 2, 3, 4, and then
Mm-hmm.
falling in the BCS rankings from there.
Yep. Well, I guess it's a college football playoff ranking now, but yeah.
Okay.
But so who do you have? Who do you have making the playoff this year?
So I got 5 that I'm very confident that are going to make it. And that is Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, and Texas.
Okay.
Now, I'm pretty confident that those teams, excuse me, my 5, Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, and Alabama. And in
Okay.
Alabama. Now, I don't know who wins the SEC because there's 3 SEC teams in that top 5, right?
Right.
But I'm very confident that with the strength of schedule, Georgia, Texas, and Alabama, he probably could have all 2 losses. I think they still get in because
Yeah.
they've beaten each other. They've had enough quality wins. I think those 3 get in. Ohio State, I think, is going to have an elite year. I think this is their year that they might go undefeated. They're going to be up there. And then Oregon, I'm looking for big things out of Oregon.
Yeah.
I really like their quarterback transfer. And just I think that they're going to dominate, have a really good year in the Big Ten. Then I start my first at-large team's Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame gets in. They're solid, good schedule. And then I have Mizzou, another
Okay.
SEC team.
Okay.
I have Utah. I have Arizona, Miami, SMU. That's 11. And then I
Okay.
couldn't decide on number 12. I have Ole Miss because I don't know. They're good. They're great. They're talented. I kind of don't know. But then I have also Boise State. I looked at their schedule. I think that they could have 1 loss and be one of those teams that's just sitting there waiting on someone to lose at the end of the year with all the big games the big conferences have
Right.
and get in there. So I ended up with 13. Obviously, the big surprise is being, I think, Arizona is because Utah is ranked 12th. It wouldn't surprise anybody if they make the playoffs, right? I mean, people are
Right.
predicting that. Mizzou's 11. Again, they're thought of as a top 12 team. But Arizona's 21, Miami's 19, SMU is not ranked, Boise State is not ranked, and Ole Miss sits at 6. So
Okay.
obviously people wouldn't be surprised if they got in, but I just know from the SEC they're probably going to have 3 losses. And where's that 3rd loss coming? Is it late in the season, early? What'd you come up with?
So I'm with you on Georgia, Texas, and Ohio State, and Oregon. I have all of those on my list, right? I think Michigan and Penn State make it. Sharon Moore, I think, is a really great coach. He really proved himself during the whole Harbaugh drama last year. And I think if you can keep the boat afloat, so to speak, as he did in the midst of all the chaos and drama and constant media attention, then I think you're a good enough coach that you could probably, when you get the full lead, you can probably figure out a way to get your team into the playoff. I think Penn State makes it. They had a really young quarterback last year who played lights out, and their defense is always good. And I think that maturation of that quarterback coming in after having another year starting, and I just feel like it's almost that time that Penn State finally kind of turns the corner. I like James Franklin as a coach. I think he does a really nice job out there. He did a
I've
really
been saying
great,
that for a few years on Penn State, though. I agree with
yeah,
that. I keep thinking it's the year they turn the corner.
right. I mean, he did an incredible job with Vanderbilt, which is what led him to the Penn State job. So I just think that whole dynamic there, especially with the Big Ten, I really feel that there's going to be some odd teams sprinkled in, but the majority of our playoff is going to be Big Ten and SEC is the majority of what we're gonna see. There's going to be some other teams. I've got Utah in there again. I think that they're going to win the Big 12. I don't think that they're going to have much setback with joining. I have Clemson in there because I think they're going to win the ACC. I don't trust Florida State this year. They got DJ Ugalele came over from Oregon State, and he was highly touted when he came into Clemson and just never really panned out. He's a decent quarterback, definitely plays the game better than I could, but he just never grew into that role that we all thought that he was going to be, coming in behind Trevor Lawrence. Everybody thought he was going to be the next big thing, and he just never quite really made it. And I think Florida State takes a serious step back this year.
They lost so much.
They lost, right. Jordan Travis is gone. Keon Coleman's gone. Jared Verse is gone. I mean, they lost a lot that kept them at 13-0. And I like Mike Norvell as a coach, but I think this is kind of one of those regroup years for him. So I like Clemson to win the ACC and end up in the playoff. And then I've got Notre Dame, Ole Miss, I agree with you on. And then my dark horse team is Colorado. Yeah. I think Shedeur Sanders is the real deal at quarterback. If they can figure out a way to protect him and figure out a way to, and you don't really have to play a whole lot of defense in the Big 12, right? So I think that that'll be somewhat of a benefit for them swapping into the Big 12. And the truth is the Big 12 really was Texas and Oklahoma. Kansas State would, surprise some people every once in a while. And, Texas Tech, or not Texas Tech, but TCU, Texas Christian, a couple years back went on that magical run. But truthfully, in the Power 5 or now Power 4 conference, the ACC and the Big 12 kind of sit there at the bottom, kind of scrambling to see who's going to be the third toughest, because we know SEC and the Big 10 are the toughest. And so I think Colorado can go into the Big 12 if they can solidify a defense and get a pass rush, get some decent protection for Shedeur. And Travis Hunter's, an elite just football player, right? He can do it. He can do it all. So they have the talent, and I think Deion's going to have them boys fired up. I don't think that Deion anticipated things going the way that they went last year. I think he really thought that they were going to have more success, and I think he's going to have them more prepared to have more success.
Well, they are under the most pressure. I think and maybe a lot of that self-induced, right? They are quick to tell you how good they are, what they're going to do to you. And that brings a lot of eyes on you, good and bad. And they saw that last year. Every team that's going to walk into Boulder and everywhere they travel is going to want to stomp them. And then rob their jewelry in the locker room, and that's proven. They bring that attention. And there was just too much for them last year. Yeah. Can they grow and learn from that and be able to, separate the media and all the hype and go out and play football on Saturdays? I don't think they can. But I love the show. It's very entertaining. I never watched Colorado football or been tuned in until last year. And I made sure whether I was on the road or at home, I was tuning in to watch Colorado football.
Yes. And the truth is I'm going to be tuned in just as much this year.
For sure.
When Deion was playing in his playing career, of course, he played for your beloved Cowboys for so many years. And then, he came in and stole candy from the baby Dan Snyder for a couple of years, as he sat on the bench with turf toe for us. But, I couldn't stand him. I couldn't stand his showboating and his, I'm better than everybody else. And I think a lot of that came from my parents. My parents were real bad about not into all of that. And I think I garnered some of that. And then as I got older, I, watching the highlights and all of that. And I just realized how just great Deion was, and he brings that attention onto himself because he thrives in that pressure. I would like to see him push some of that attention away because maybe those kids don't thrive under that pressure. I think his kids, because they've been around it all their lives, probably do.
Well, yeah,
Um,
Shadur and Travis Hunter, sure. Those guys have a great, those guys I believe can handle it. They can bear that weight on their shoulders. But
mhm,
the other 70 kids on your roster, no,
right,
they're not ready for that. And
right.
that's what all of that brought to them. And I have no doubt that those elite guys can.
Yeah,
But it's the 50th man on the roster, your other corner away from Travis,
yeah.
can your safeties and linebackers and those kids, your kicker, it's tough. But I'd love to see them do it. I don't think they do. I think that they're in for another, maybe 8-4, and I don't think that's good enough to get them in.
Probably not. I have him on there just as kind of a dark horse. Could possibly, maybe, if all the cards fell right.
So
But
let me go back to now thinking about the conference champions, right? So in the ACC, I guess with mine, I would have Miami is my highest ranked ACC team. So I guess I have Miami winning
the
the
ACC,
ACC. And then in the Big 12, it would be it would be two ACC teams, SMU and Miami, and then Arizona would be winning the Big 12 for me. Or no, Utah would be ranked ahead. So Utah, Arizona.
okay,
So you switched it up. You added some Big Ten teams in there. I
yeah,
have two Big Ten. So see what
yeah.
happens there.
I really feel like that this college football playoff committee, is going to be real biased to the SEC and Big Ten. Just, they're the blue bloods of it all.
Absolutely.
So we were talking about Dion and the pressure that he's under. We have some coaches that are going to be under the hot seat. I think we were talking last week trying to get prepared for all of this and throwing some names and stuff out there. And you threw out Sam Pittman. I think obviously Billy Napier with Florida is on that list. And then I put down Ryan Day for Ohio State, because if he manages to lose to Michigan again this year, I think he's done. I put Brent Venables from Oklahoma on there because they've had a lot of fast starts and not been able to continue that momentum. So I feel like he's getting into that area of, if he can't figure out, especially joining a new conference, like if we can't get this figured out in year one of the SEC, we might need to find a new coach to go ahead and guide us through our toddler years of the SEC. And then two kind of dark horse candidates. I like Sharon Moore at Michigan, but I think this is going to be, they had all the allegations and everything come down, and all the different suspensions and stuff that came with the cheating scandal and recruiting violations that happened at Michigan last year. And so I think he's going to be under a microscope. I don't know that he has to win a national title, but I think he has to make the college football playoff and make it feel like it's a seamless transition. I think his leash is going to be really short.
I could see that. You don't want to fall flat, right? You
Right.
can't ride last year and come in and be 500
Right.
unless, and that's a couple of early losses and they can really go off the rails. So I didn't think about him as being on the hot seat, but yeah, I could see that. You start off 2-2 and
Yeah.
you end 500, just you could see it going bad quickly.
Yeah. And then the last one that's kind of a dark horse is Lincoln Riley, right? You lose Caleb Williams, gave you a ton of money and bought you out of Oklahoma to bring you and Caleb over here. It never materialized into a national championship or a college playoff berth or even a Pac-12 championship. Yeah, Caleb won the Heisman Trophy, but you won, you had three other quarterbacks that have won Heisman trophies underneath you. So I feel like especially transitioning into the Big Ten, again, a tougher conference, bigger, better schedule, more TV time. Expectations are higher in moving into all of this. So if we're not competing for a playoff spot and we don't make it to this 12-team playoff, because now it's not just 4 teams, we've expanded, we've tripled the amount of teams that are going to be in here. And if you can't figure out how to make a 12-team playoff, we might need to find a new coach that can.
Yeah, I need to look up and see who his defensive coordinator is, if he made that change last year, because he's got a lot of grace because he's going to put up the offensive numbers. and it's fun
Right.
to watch, right? And you can go out and lose games 48-47, 48-42, but 52-4, you can go out and put those numbers up, which he does. And you can always say, well, my defense, my defense. But at what point is your defense poor enough? You're the head coach, you oversee it all. Some of that blame's got to fall on you. Teams in the Big Ten can play defense. And you're not going to be having those shootouts unless you play the Ohio States and the Oregons. Everybody else, it's going to be some low scoring, pounded out, cold games they're going to be playing, traveling to,
Right.
and you win in games, 21-17.
Right.
And can he do that?
Right.
So,
And you're not in Southern California anymore. These places you're going to travel in the middle of winter,
yeah,
snow and ice,
absolutely. So
and it
I think
hurts when
he
you
still got
hit.
I think he still got some leeway because of pedigree and what he can put on the field offensively. But I see a couple years that being a big problem if he doesn't get someone in there to turn that defense around. Because
Yeah.
you're not going to beat everybody by scoring in 50s, upper 40s anymore.
No. And Notre Dame proved that to him last year, right? It was a low scoring Notre Dame game that they lost. It was heartbreaking, and so I just, yeah. If he made the change and the defense is looking better and they look at least competitive, he may survive and get another year or two. But I think he's definitely under the microscope. So
Well, I kind of dove into the two that we talked about, Billy Napier and Pittman. I think he's the one that's at the big job that is really, he's been turning it around. The recruiting is getting better, but he's 11-14 in his 2 seasons, 6-10 in the SEC. Last year was 5-7, but he's got the toughest schedule maybe ever in college football this year, right? So you were 5-7 last year, didn't make a bowl, and now you've got 7 opponents that are in the top 20.
right.
Unreal. I
I
mean,
think 4 of them are in the top 10.
yeah, it's unreal, right? And when you're a team that's not there yet, you're trying to get there, and it's like, oh, here you go. He's got the toughest road because the Gators are not going to accept 500 a year.
No.
And I think that's what's inevitably going to happen. And it could be a decent year. They could have some big wins and just not win all the big games. You split the
Right.
big games and then lose early. I think they play Miami early.
They play Miami week 1.
Week one, you start off with that loss, and then you just split your big games late in the season. So then he's got a tough road. And I don't see Napier making it through the season. Sam Pittman at Arkansas, my Hogs. So he went 9-4 in 21, and we were like, "Woo, we've got our man."
Yeah.
Then he was 7-6 drop off, and then 4-8 last year.
Mhm.
So he's going the wrong direction.
Most definitely.
Most colleges would have fired him after last year, but he's got a lot of good equity, sweat equity built up with us. Great guy. We believe in him. But we've already hired Petrino.
Right.
And Bobby was, coach for us back when we, took us to the Sugar Bowl, where we had it with Ryan Mallett. And we were riding high, and then he decided, he wanted to go motorcycle riding with his girlfriend. We can dive into that later in the season when we need to fill some time. But he's back. We're a forgiving program. We just want to win, baby. Just win.
Right.
And so he's sitting in the waiting. Sam Pittman, and we got a tough schedule as well. I kind of foresee us. Honestly, he would need to have another, 7-5, and then go to a bowl game and win that bowl game and be 8-5. And I could see Pittman coming back. That's probably the border right there. We got to finish 7-5, go to the bowl, win that bowl. So we've had a winning record. We won our last game. All right, we're going to rebuild with this Bobby Petrino offense. Anything less than that, I think he's gone.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
And then I stuck in the SEC with my 3. I just added one, and it's Clark Lee with Vanderbilt. So Vanderbilt, they had not high expectations, but Franklin kind of showed them that, hey, you can be a legitimate program. We can compete. Before he left for Penn State. He took over in 2020. They were 0-9, pandemic year. Throw that one out, right? Didn't win a game.
Right.
Only got to play the SEC teams. That's tough, right?
Yeah.
2021, he goes 2-10, improved. 2022, he goes 5-7. Oh crap! Vanderbilt's like, oh, here we go. We got our guy, 5-7. And then the next year they go 2-10 last year. So they have that fall off. He has another fall off. He's gone. Even
Most
though
definitely.
even though it's Vanderbilt, now that you show them a little bit that we can win, right? You give them a little taste of victory, and that the fandom, the fanatic comes out, and all of us like, we want,
Yeah.
the playoff. We want the playoff.
Yeah. I like the Vanderbilt one. I think it's interesting how the standard is different depending on what school you're at. I think that with all this conference realignment, it's going to come around that maybe Vanderbilt's not in the SEC anymore, right? We're going to kind of change how we do things. But until then, you are in the SEC,
Well,
and
I don't think they're leaving. I don't think they're ever leaving because we're just talking about football right now. Vanderbilt holds their own in baseball,
yeah,
basketball. But I mean, they're decent in basketball, but they compete.
they're
They've
a
been,
powerhouse in baseball, though, for
but
sure.
baseball, they're a powerhouse.
Yeah,
And that's the other sports where you got to remember where some of these schools that are like Arkansas, we accept 8 wins. We're excited, but dang it, we want Elite Eights and Final Fours in basketball.
right.
We want to make it to the College World Series in baseball. We expect that. But
Yeah.
football, we want 8 wins. It's different, right? Like you just said, it's
Yeah.
different.
And the expectations, right? And so we'll dive into that, right? The expectation at Vanderbilt and Arkansas are different than what they are at Florida. And I know we both have Billy Napier as this is probably the hottest seat in all of college football. And I could honestly, just based on their schedule, and I don't know that it's necessarily fair to Billy. My understanding is he's a decent recruiter, but he kind of Florida got in the news with the quarterback that they promised all the money to and then didn't pay him. And you know, the schedule being what the schedule is, I could almost see Billy being gone before season's end. That about the midway mark, if they're sitting with only 1 or 2 wins, coming into late October, early November, they may go ahead and say we're going to start our head coaching search early. Because the expectation at Florida is we're going to compete for a national title every year. We're going to be in the SEC championship game every year. I don't know that they've ever really had that kind of success. I mean, they've won national titles, right? But I don't know that they've always necessarily been in the mix. They like to think they are. I know a lot of Gator fans, and they like to think that they're always in the mix. The truth is they've had a lot of good years and a lot of decent years. But their expectation is we're going to be good enough to be in this every year. And they generally have a very short leash. To be honest, I'm surprised he's getting a chance at year 3. Just from the track record that Florida has for firing coaches that aren't successful.
I agree. They think that sum it up like this. The Gator fan base, they think that every 4 years they should be in a national championship game or in a position to play for the national championship. That because they're getting a recruiting class and those group of kids come through there every 4 years, we should be there. And that's about how it works out with Florida. They cycle through, but they think every 4 years, if you haven't done it by now, you're doing something wrong. It's you. It's not us.
Right. And so coming into year 3, if you don't even look like you're competing to make it to the playoff, much less the championship game, well, we know we're not going to be good enough in year 4. So let's go ahead and we're going to go ahead and reset the.
You had year 2 to show us you were rebuilding and you failed.
Right.
You got year 3 to surprise us. And the recruits are there though. The recruiting class, like you said, he's done a great job. He's getting the kids in. They're bringing the kids in. You gotta transition that into on the field and W's.
Right. And that's the thing. We saw the same thing at Texas A&M with Jimbo Fisher, right? The recruits were coming in. He had the number 1 recruiting class probably 3 of the 5 years he was there, and it just didn't transition into success on the field.
All the recruits, the boosters, everyone was behind him. He was bringing in the kids and the talent, and boy, did he fail.
Right.
Never seen a coach, people so happy to buy out a guy.
Right. At $77 million, right? I mean, like, can somebody give me $77 million to go sit down?
Boy.
So we could transition. We talked earlier about Shador and Travis Hunter, who are both probably top candidates on the Heisman watch. So we'll transition into predicting some Heisman Trophy candidates
Yeah, I'm
for the
interested. You
upcoming
got
season.
any non-quarterbacks on your list?
Um,
Travis
I
Hunter,
actually
probably. He's on
Travis
my
Hunter is
list.
really the only non-quarterback. So I was doing some research, and ESPN has Carson Beck, Quinn Ewers, Dylan Gabriel, Jalen Moore of Alabama, and Will Howard from Ohio State. He transferred from Kansas State. Um, he has all of those guys. They have all of those guys as your top 5 Heisman candidates right now. Um, I think Shador Sanders should be one, based off of his performances last year with no offensive line, throwing for damn near 500 yards a game. He pretty much had to even be in a game. So, Travis Hunter is the only non-quarterback that I really have on there. I think a guy that plays both sides. We talk about that the Heisman Trophy is awarded to the best football player in college football.
Right. It should be.
How Travis Hunter hasn't won it every year that he's been in college, because he plays both sides of the ball and plays more snaps than anybody else in all of college football, is, a little bit beyond me. But I like Cameron Ward of Miami, though, as a
Okay.
dark horse to win it. He was kind of starting to get in the Heisman buzz while he was at Washington State last year. Looked really good. There was a chance he might have gone pro. He was trying to figure out what he was going to do with the Pac-12 pretty much being disillusioned, and dissolved. So he ends up at Miami. Miami has a track record for developing quarterbacks, and having Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks. They have some history there of that happening. So I could see Cameron Ward.
I like that. I did not think I looked at him. I didn't think that though, but a big part of my list is making that college football playoff. It means you're relevant. You've won games. You've won big games. Your team success. So I love that because I've always, as you know, I got Miami in the playoffs. So I think that's a great pick.
And then the dark horse that I have is Riley Leonard for Notre Dame. Played at Duke last year. I think he got banged up a little bit last year. But he was really in that conversation of dark horse candidate last year. And then he kind of dropped off with the injury. And, his coach left Duke to go to Notre Dame. Coach left Duke to go to Texas A&M. And everybody thought he might follow him down there to Texas A&M. And he ended up at Notre Dame. And Notre Dame's really kind of been slinging it around. They've been trying to find that quarterback that's going to put them over the top. They used Sam Hartman last year.
And he was kind of transfer. Was he from West Virginia? Where did he transfer?
No, he was from Wake Forest.
Wake Forest. That's right, Wake Forest.
And, he ended up being an undrafted free agent in the NFL. He's actually in Commanders camp this year. Looking pretty decent, but obviously no chance to start with us having taken Jaden Daniels. But, Jaden Daniels kind of was a dark horse, maybe possibly. And, he just had a stellar season last year in college football and really ran away with the Heisman Trophy. Riley Leonard's not Jaden Daniels when it comes to running, but he does have that dual threat capability. He's got a little bit of speed to him, a little bit of size to him, and great arm strength. And in that Notre Dame offense, especially if he can propel Notre Dame into the college football playoff, I think that might be a nice little dark horse.
I love those picks. Yeah, those good picks. Especially the dark horses, because you got guys that are not in the, because you're going to hear my list and my quarterbacks are that ESPN list. Like you listed them and I was like, dang. What else you got?
Off of ESPN's list, I don't know that Quinn Ewers is really that big of a Heisman candidate.
You started talking about him with Texas, and I got him on my list, and I'm thinking, you never know how the season's going to play out, but injury prone. I didn't really take that into account, and then I know Arch is there. Like I get that, right? But there's a lot of hype around yours, and he's got a lot of people talking about how good this kid is,
and
and that's with all the people that want to see Arch.
Right. And don't get me wrong, I think Ewers is a phenomenal quarterback. I really do. And he came back because he wanted that opportunity to go in the first round, right? He was not projected to be a first round draft pick. He took Texas to the playoff, maybe come back, finish the job, maybe he gets into that first round conversation. The question is can you stay healthy all year, right? He missed 3 weeks last season, you know, and the thing is that if you miss time this year, um, the kid Murphy that came in for him last year just didn't play as well as everybody expected that he was going to play. And so there was no chance that Quinn was going to lose his starting job to him. Everything that I've heard that's coming out of Texas's spring practices and spring games is that Arch Manning looks ready to go right now. Like he's everything that he's been hyped up to be. Granted, that's practice, and you're not playing
Which is
against
so
any real
interesting that he
competition.
even chose Texas,
Right.
right? Like for a kid to have that much, because yours was already there. He was what, a sophomore,
Yes.
and had already played. And I find that move interesting, right? The going to Texas, I always blew my mind. Like you have so much hype, good pedigree. You could probably have picked wherever you wanted. You picked
Right.
Texas where it's great, shows that you want to compete, but look at your situation now. And he hasn't jumped ship like any other kid would have with the transfer portal as it is. It shows a
Well,
lot of character. He's sticking it out, but man,
and I
when
think
you
a lot
see
of
him,
that has to do with the legacy of who's helping him make those decisions, right? As
100%,
far as staying, right?
they see the bigger
Between
picture.
right, between grandpa and the two uncles that played in the NFL, and they all went and sat their time. Peyton Manning didn't start as a freshman at Tennessee. Eli Manning didn't start as a freshman at Ole Miss. Um, Everything that I heard about the move to go to Texas was that at first it wasn't the SEC. There was the rumblings that it might be, but it wasn't the SEC. So it wasn't Peyton and Eli's domain, right? And it wasn't Peyton or Eli's schools. You know,
Which I
um,
respect completely. Go do your own
they
thing. They all did their own thing. They didn't
right,
follow pops. They did their. Well, I
exactly.
guess Eli did.
Eli
Yeah.
did, but and even Peyton stayed in the SEC. But really, Arch has an opportunity to solidify Texas, and kind of create his own legacy there at Texas that
But
isn't
he needs an
attached to.
injury to do that
He
as a
does.
pro, you know?
If for this year he does, because that's the thing is if Quinn Ewers goes down, I don't know that he'll come back if Arch comes in and really balls out and they're on the fast track to do whatever it is that they want to do this season. It kind of becomes that do we bring back in the old starter or do we ride the hot hand? Um, so that's why you know, I'm a Texas fan. And I love Quinn Ewers. I think he's a great quarterback. His injury history is what shies me away from him. I'm not huge on Carson Beck either. Watching him play last year,
Not
I
on my
just
list. I
I
agree.
just don't. I think he's on there because he's Georgia's quarterback,
Because you're going to win 11 games.
right? And I didn't see. And he's a homegrown kid from here in Jacksonville, right? He went to Mandarin High, and so I hope him all the success. But I just didn't see anything from his passing game last year that just jumped out on the screen to me that said, "Oh, that guy's a Heisman Trophy candidate."
For sure. When you're comparing him to guys like Jalen Milroe, Travis Hunter, just throw
Right,
those two out there.
right,
What am I seeing out of Beck that's going to make me think he's the best player in college football? And
yeah,
I don't. But he's going to win games. He's going to have good stats. He's going to
yeah,
again going to win 11 games, and he'll probably be getting votes, right? Because he's playing in great big games and he's throwing game-winning touchdowns.
yeah,
But if we're really looking at the best player, yeah, he didn't make my list either. So
yeah. And then the other one that I didn't really agree with on ESPN's list was Will Howard for Ohio State University. He transfers over from Kansas State, and nothing about anything he did at Kansas State. I mean, he made some decent plays here and there, but nothing that he did really screamed Heisman candidate to me. And I know Ryan Day kind of runs a different kind of offense and is going to probably get the most out of Will Howard that Will Howard may not have even known that it was there. I just don't know that he's going to be necessarily a Heisman candidate. So I
I
think
agree with that.
some of these guys are on here because of the schools that they attend, right? I do like the Dylan Gabriel for Oregon. The style of offense that Oregon runs will fit Dylan Gabriel very well. He was a Heisman candidate until late in the season last year with Oklahoma. So I think transferring to Oregon was really good, and I could see, and I think even the year that he played at UCF before he had that injury, I think he was a Heisman candidate that year. So I'll be interested to see what he does at Oregon and where he stacks up at the end of the year on this Heisman watch list. But I really, if they have a good season and he plays the amount of snaps that he played last year, I really believe that Travis Hunter wins the Heisman Trophy this year.
I like it. I like that. I think he's so let me get my easy quarterbacks out of there, right? The Jalen Milroe, very high on him. He's a stud. He's improved every year at Alabama. They're going to have the victories, the big games. He's going to have the stats.
Yeah,
He's going to be there. Dylan Gabriel, same thing. Big games. He's going to have the stats. Their record's going to reflect. He's going to be there. Quentin Ewers, I feel he's going to be there for all the same reasons.
right.
And then sleepers at quarterback, I have Brady Cook of Missouri.
Oh, I like that one.
I have a good feeling he's going to be paired up with um, Luther Burden III
Okay.
at wide receiver, and he's one of my non-quarterbacks to look for. Another
Okay.
Devontae Smith, maybe.
Okay.
But I think those two are going to have a great year and be the best quarterback wide receiver combo out there. If they hopefully they don't split votes, but look for those two. I think Mizzou's going to have a big year. They did last year. I think they're riding that. They great transfers coming in, good recruiting class. They got something good going up there in Missouri. And then the last sleeper at quarterback is Noah Fafita. Hope I said that right. It's an Arizona quarterback.
Okay. Yeah. I was reading a little
Um,
bit about him. Yeah.
Yeah, that kid is only a sophomore, but I expect looking for big things out of Arizona to have a big year. Again, in my 12-team playoff,
Right.
and I think he's going to have some great numbers. They've got a great offense, so another sleeper at the quarterback position. So there's my 5 quarterbacks to look out for. The non-quarterbacks, Travis Hunter, of course, leads that list. He's
Right.
gonna again if he just puts up 6 picks, a punt return touchdown. Gets himself 8 touchdowns, receiving RPOs, however he gets in there.
Right.
He's going to be that player that everyone, he's got that wow factor. So as long as if Colorado stays relevant, because I think they might fall off again, but if they stay relevant, he's going to be right there. Luther Burden III, wide receiver out of Mizzou, I mentioned him earlier.
Right.
Just think that they're going to be that team that's going to be that surprise SEC. It's like just like last year. I think again they're going to be right there. And with him and Brady Cook, they're just going to have a lot of eyes on him, and he's going to be there at the end of the year. And then, is it Ollie Gordon the third, running back out of Oklahoma State,
Yes.
the Doak Walker Award winner last year.
Yeah.
He's coming back, and if Oklahoma State can, again, they got to have a good year, but that's my one running back that I think could really have another great year. I've also played with the kid, not with him, against him on NCAA 25, and
Yeah.
he's a stud. He's tough to tackle. If that translates to the real field, it gets tough.
Making Heisman picks based on NCAA 25, huh?
I
That's
am on that
great.
one. He's a
No,
tough tackle.
I do like the Ali Gordon pick. I find it hard to look at the future Heisman Trophy winner and not think about what quarterback, right? It almost feels like here as of late, minus the Devontae Smith a couple of years ago, it's really become the quarterback award, kind of how MVP in the NFL has really kind of become the quarterback's award. Like nobody else seems to really be able to break in there, and it takes a magical season from somebody that's not a quarterback, it feels like, to win it. Even the days of recent past where the Derrick Henrys and those kind of guys, at the running back position or winning it is really few and far between, and so it'll be
It takes the
interesting.
quarterbacks that we talked about. Those quarterbacks have to not have the elite year. They
Mhm.
all have to have around the same, 25 touchdowns. They're all setting the same amount of yardage. But then
Right,
there's that running back that's just 30 touchdowns, whatever it is. They do like, wow, this guy has really, popped, and all the quarterbacks were right there. How do you decide between guys that are, all have 9 wins? Nobody's having an elite season.
right.
But yeah,
Yeah.
what's the kid? Did Najee Harris win the Heisman?
No, Najee Harris did not win the
He
Heisman.
did not. Okay. I was trying to think of the last running back that did win it.
I'm pretty sure it was an Alabama running back. Hmm.
Looking that up.
Look it up. Yeah, let's find it.
Derrick Henry,
Derrick Henry. So Derrick Henry.
2015.
So and then the last non-quarterback to win it was probably Devontae Smith in what was that
2020.
2020? Was that the COVID year that he won the Heisman? Because Mac Jones was his quarterback, and Mac Jones was part of that COVID draft.
It was 2021.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So I think that really does it for our preseason college football talk, man. Be interested to see where all this falls come game time. I know we got a couple of games this coming Saturday. So starting August 24th, we've
And
got a
that's
couple
not
of
the
games.
typical. I think the next weekend's the big kickoff, right?
Yeah, the next weekend's a big kickoff. I think there's only 2 or 3 games on the 24th, and then the real season starts. We start getting real games on the 29th. So I think it's 29th, 30th, and so on. So
Yeah.
I think they even have a Sunday game and a Monday night game that week. So since there's not quite
No NFL, yeah.
NFL yet.
Oh, there's some big
So
matchups. Like I think is that I wrote it down. It was no, that's the next weekend when Texas goes to Ann Arbor on 9/7.
yeah,
There's a big feel of how those programs are going to go this year.
right, right.
A lot of big games. What's the other one that's a big on week one? There's Miami, Florida.
Miami, Florida, which could tell us how Florida's season's going to go right off the bat. And then, man, I can't remember right off the top of my head. I think I looked because we got predictions coming up later. I looked at some of the earlier games that are going to be happening for my predictions. But going into the NFL, we're talking about paid professionals earlier. Uh, we've got a lot of NFL holdouts, and I want to get your take on how you even feel about a guy that's holding out for a new contract, and then maybe what you feel about some of these certain players, right? So we've got Brandon Ayuk, who is a hold in. He's actually reported to training camp, just not doing any of the practicing. The latest on him is that Pittsburgh has a deal in place and a trade ready if San Francisco will agree on it. But San Francisco is close to extending. It says the last report that I read is that there's just some language on the 4th year of the contract that they're butting heads about. So he
Yeah,
may end up staying.
that really transitioned, right? Like it felt like he was out the door.
Yeah,
And then it was New England, and no, he didn't want to go to New England. And then it was he's going to go to Pittsburgh, and that deal was all but done. And then here it is. They're like you said, they're just at the stage of signing that deal, changing language. So that's been
right,
very interesting with Ayuk.
right. And he was almost to Cleveland too. Cleveland was willing to trade Amari Cooper to bring him in.
Did not hear that.
Yeah, and he refused to go to Cleveland as well. So he's being very strategic. He even tweeted out at one point in time, some fan had tweeted something, and he was like, "San Francisco's always in the media with something. Tell them that they know there's only 2 options, so pick one and let's move on." So I don't know what those 2 options were. He didn't elaborate in his little tweet, but it was apparently 2 options and only 2 options. I'm going to assume one was to So I saw a podcast with him, and they'd asked him, where does Brandon Ayuk play? Give me the top 3 places that Brandon Ayuk plays in 2024. And it was on the Pivot podcast. And he said San Francisco. So that was his top choice. Washington, because Jaden Daniels is his best friend, or Pittsburgh. So Washington dropped out of the race fairly quickly, which I would have liked to see him stay in and see if we couldn't have made that deal happen. Although I don't think San Francisco was ever really planning on trading him based on how quickly, as soon as the deal got done with Pittsburgh and Pittsburgh was all in on it, they all of a sudden they had this contract that they're really close on. So I don't know that he was ever going anywhere. But I sure would have liked to see him dress in a little bit different color red and a little different color gold.
I'm glad that didn't happen. I didn't know about that Jaden Daniels relationship. I'm glad that.
Oh yeah, yeah. They played together at Arizona State. Actually, Jaden Daniels' freshman year, they called their own audible and beat somebody. I forget who it was. I think it was Oregon. That's right. Beat Oregon on a late bomb that Jaden Daniels threw to Brandon Ayuk. So they've remained very close friends.
That's one of those you scored. Like, did we just become best friends?
Yeah. So now you've also got Jamar Chase. There's really no real news on it. I think the most recent thing was he actually missed showing up to meetings the day before their second preseason game.
Yep.
Other than that, he's been there and been present, just not practicing.
But it seems like he's very adamant. He might sit out. Like, he may be the biggest surprise that's kind of not been talked about. And it's probably because it's Cincinnati. Not much comes out of there because they're always they're typically misrun, and they don't spend money. So everyone is used to this and become numb. But I think he's the one that may sit out. And he wants that deal. He waited on his boy Jefferson, right? His man. Yep. Justin got his money, and he said, "Okay, it's time." And he's been showing up. And now, but last week with him not going, that could get bad. And you're not hearing about it.
No, and I think it gets ugly because Cincinnati is notorious for not paying anybody, right? And they've already made the statement that they don't feel like that there's a deal to be done before the start of the season.
It's crazy.
And I don't know if you remember this, but there was a few years ago, Carson Palmer, right? Quarterback. They were going to the playoffs every year, in contention for the AFC North every year. And he ends up retiring because Cincinnati won't rework his deal.
Yeah.
And won't trade him. Yeah. And then he ends up in Arizona a few years later.
Yeah.
But, they're notorious. And you're right. They're one of those franchises that are notoriously mismanaged. We're going to get into another one here in a second because it's going to piggyback off of this next one. But Matthew Judon, who's holding out for New England, traded to Atlanta. Atlanta's had a couple of really good pickups this week, but traded to Atlanta, but they haven't agreed to a deal yet. So I'm going to be interested to see, does he show up to Atlanta without a new deal and give them time to work one out? Or is he going to continue to sit out and not report until a deal's done? Like this guy. Yeah, like Hassan Reddick for the Jets, right? Another team that is notoriously mismanaged, right? Hassan Reddick told them that he was not going to play without a new deal. They traded for him anyways. Come out with a statement 2 or 3 days ago that says, we maintain that Hassan can come and play under the current deal. We're not going to extend him right now, and he'll continue to get fined until he shows up. But our expectation is that he is with the team. And
the reports are that he made it very cleir that he wanted a new deal.
Yeah. Well, that was the whole reason he asked for the trade from Philadelphia.
We'll take you.
Right.
And now they don't understand why they're in the position they're in. The guy very clear said, I want a new deal. Which is why I'm not going to play for the Eagles. They won't give me a new deal. Oh, we'll trade for you. Come over here. We're going to hope that you love playing with Aaron Rodgers and
right. And what I think's funny is that Joe Douglas, the GM for the Jets, used to work for Howie Roseman, the GM of the Eagles. Right. So we have these two guys that have a relationship. How do you not warn your guy that there's no chance that this dude's coming to play for you without a new deal? And or do you just think,
if I was in that room, I bet that information was shared, and they just had a feeling that they could get him in the locker room and they like the mojo that they think that they have going, and he would, he would play.
Maybe Aaron Rodgers should have taken him to the dark room with him,
Come to the desert, my man. Let's go.
And then the other one that you're not hearing much about, and I think this one's the one that I don't agree with. I used to always struggle with how do I feel about these NFL players that are making millions and millions of dollars every year to go out and play a kid's game, holding out because they want more money. And I think there for a while I got upset about it, and I didn't like guys that did it. And I think most of that was jealousy, right? Because I can't hold out for my job, right? Yeah. I can't just sit down on the couch and say, until you give me a raise, I'm not coming into work. I mean, I could, but the chances are I'm going to be fired. And
I think that's where the jealousy comes in, because if we were elite at our jobs,
right,
and bringing in tons of monies for our company, we could say, hey, I'm going to renegotiate, right? That's what when you have the leverage is when these players do what they do.
Right. And that's kind of where I came around to, right? Is why shouldn't they be allowed, if they're doing what the next guy is doing that's gotten paid more than what they're getting paid? This last one, though, is the one that I don't agree with, right? Is Trent Williams. So obviously I have a long-standing history with Trent Williams as a Commanders fan. He was there for a while and forced himself out, and rightfully so, right? Our ownership was jacked, our culture was jacked, and he deserved to go somewhere where he could get paid and have a better working environment. But he's still got 3 years left on his deal, and he's seeing all of these other guys getting paid. And he's 36 years old.
36 years old. That's what I was saying. Yeah, I was going to say, what are you really trying to do here? You're getting max. You've got 2 good years left. You got 3 on your contract.
Right. And, I don't know what the 49ers can do. Maybe make some more of his money guaranteed than what is currently guaranteed to help him out here. But while you are the best left tackle in the NFL, we don't know how much longer you're going to be that. And you've signed this contract, and you have 3 years remaining on it. I'm personally okay with guys that have 1 or 2 years remaining, trying to get some of that long-term, security. But how much long-term security do you want compared to how much can you give the 49ers, right? Because if I've got you for 3 years, you're 36, I'm going to have you to your 39 season. So that means the very next season,
you're very likely going to finish this contract and be done.
Right. We don't see many left tackles playing past 39, 40. You had Dwayne Brown, I think, played at 41 years old last year. But it's very rare. Big bodies, a lot of banging around. The injuries take their toll. When they lose their step, they lose it immediately. Like, it's not a small sample size of
even if you're out there like Jason Peters, still can make a roster. You're not making Pro Bowls. Right. You're just making rosters, you're fill-in, and that's all you're going to be at the end of this contract.
Right. And so I feel like that the 49ers maybe can do some things to help him out, make him feel more comfortable, give him, a little bit more guaranteed money on this back end of his deal. But I don't know that if I'm the 49ers that I restructure, and whether he's the best left tackle in football or not, I may let him just continue to sit out unless it's kind of one of those Chris Jones situations from last year, right? The Chiefs let Chris Jones sit out the first year or the first game, and they saw how bad it was without him, and they said, "Oh, we're going to sign you immediately.
Here's the max money you wanted."
Right, yeah. And so, I think if it turns into that for the 49ers, week 1, Brock Purdy's just getting blown up from the left side, maybe we go ahead and figure out what we got to do to make this work. But they're starting to run out of room here, right? Because Brock Purdy's due for a contract extension after the end of this season. I don't know unless he does some Tom Brady stuff, but the kid has made it to the NFC Championship every year as a starting quarterback. He's already made it to a Super Bowl. He had you ahead in the Super Bowl. You figured out how to squash that lead. didn't help that Patrick Mahomes was on the other side of it. But the truth of the matter is that Brock Purdy can pretty much command whatever he wants at this point, money wise.
He gets back to that in it, just the NFC Championship game again this year for sure. And because
Yeah,
you can say whatever you want about he doesn't have the size, the arm strength, but the kid wins games,
right.
he's going to get paid, right? And you've got Debo, Ayuk if he stays, McCaffrey,
Right.
um,
Yeah, you just gave McCaffrey more money. You're about
Fred
to give
Warner,
Ayuk more money. You're going to have to give Fred Warner more money. You've already
Dre
got
Greenlaw,
Bosa.
Dre
Bosa
Greenlaw,
already. Yeah,
Osa.
Greenlaw.
Those
I
guys are
mean,
staying. Those are pivotal anchors on your team. And as a Cowboys fan, I have been looking. I'm glad the Trent Williams thing's coming up because the problem which he's creating, but you don't hear about that. Ayuk thing popped up, but I get that. But you don't ever hear that. They just seem to make it happen. They seem to
yeah,
manage and make it to keep these players. And I'm like, where do they get the money? How are they not in the news? Because as Dallas Cowboy, Jerry Jones puts us in the news. We have to hear about this stuff all the time. And I'm like, what is San Francisco? Want some of what their front office is doing? They're pulling all this off, but it's good to see
right.
the 49ers with a little trouble out there and see how they navigate through this. Yeah, I'd like to see what they pull off with Trent. Do they make a hard stance and say, hey, we're not doing this. We got you for 3 years.
Yeah,
Either
we can.
play it out or sit out.
Yeah,
We'll save a couple $1 million a game.
or switch some money. We'll do some things like switch some money to signing bonus or whatever the case may be, so that it's all guaranteed, so that you get it up front. But there's not much we can do. We don't know when that drop off's coming, but when it does, you're going to fall off the cliff, and we have to be prepared for that. And you brought up the Cowboys, and they're an interesting bunch, right? I always Jerry Jones keeps me laughing. Sometimes here recently he's reminded me of Joe Biden when he talks to the camera because
He does not keep me laughing. I love Jerry Jones. I used to love him dearly and just admire the guy, but now I hate it. Anytime I see a microphone in front of him, I just get sick. Like
right.
they call it the Biden effect for sure. It's ridiculous. I'm like, what is he gonna say now that he's got to backtrack? Or what's he gonna put on for everyone to hear?
Yes.
So that
And
Steven, his son, has to come out and make up for it, and change the narrative.
he's said a lot about CD, right? He's talked about how they're not in a rush to get it done. And I think that's probably the noisiest holdout of them all, other
Just
than the
because it's
Brandon
Dallas.
Ayuk,
Just because
and
it's
just
Dallas.
because it's Dallas, right?
If
They're
they would
always in
just
the
sit
media.
back and let it work, it's going to get worked out. Everyone always knew he was going to get worked out. See, he's not going anywhere. But unfortunately, put that microphone in front of Jerry and he says stupid stuff like, we're not in a rush.
And
Or
so the reports are that CD's looking for 33, and they're getting close to that $33 million
I saw they
annual.
offered 33.
Oh, they did.
They did. They offered 33, which was two less than Jefferson's 35.
Mm-hmm.
Came out with 33 and it just hasn't been signed yet. So I'm expecting that maybe gets bumped up a little bit, like you talked about earlier. There's some language they're probably arguing about, but
Right.
I see that 33, 33.5. There's an extra little give in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that'll be done next week. He'll probably, even if he gets into some practices, he's not going to play that third preseason game anyway.
No.
Give him a couple of weeks and a half, 2 weeks of practice time, and he'll be there week 1 for us to stomp the Browns.
Yeah. I like it because, I mean, I would hope that he wouldn't show up, being a Commanders fan. We've seen Dak Prescott without a true number one wide receiver, and he's absolute garbage if he does not have a real number one. So I would love to see CD just continue to hold out until, we were just talking about the 49ers and all the contracts that they have to pay. The Cowboys are kind of in that same situation, right?
Oh, yeah.
They're about to pay CD somewhere between $30 and $35 million. What that final number ends up being and how it works out, it's going to be somewhere in the $30 to $35 million range, and everybody's talking about that Dak's going to be starting at $60 million next year. And you've got Michael Parsons, who's going to be due for a contract next year. And
so let me do the math on this. All right, Dak, 60 million. CD, 33.
you're going to have to pay
Nick Bosa makes 33,000 or 34 million, 33 or 34 million. He's the highest paid non. Micah's going to at least match that. So let's
Right.
just give Micah 33. I could be off by a couple million, but I think Bosa gets 33 a year.
I think somewhere in
Um,
there, 32 or 33, I believe it is.
so 126 million for three players. The NFL salary cap at this moment, I think, is 254,
Yeah.
252, 256, somewhere around there, call it 255. Let's just say 255.
So you're only
So
going to have a
that's
100.
half
Yeah.
of your that's half of your money for
Right.
three players. We're not talking about your tackles. We're not talking about your Diggs and
Right.
Bland. We're not talking
Yeah, because
about
they're already paying Diggs. Would they give him 94 million a couple of, you know?
yeah, I'm not
So
sure what Diggs is making. I'd have to look into that, but that would add to
yeah.
that 126 for sure to get up to four players that you just can't do that. And again,
No.
they are all worth it. 100%. I love all three of them. The problem is you can't have three of the highest paid players at the position on your team. And the NFL is not structured that way. You
No.
can't do it. Or you got a rookie quarterback. You could do it, but you have to have a rookie quarterback on a rookie deal. It's the only way.
Most
And we're not there.
definitely.
Unfortunately,
And
I don't know what we're going to do. I think Dak's going to be the one, though. I think Dak's going to be the short end of the stick because he's never going to agree, nor should he. I guess he could go in free agency and get his 60 million. But
right.
he's the one that Micah's going to get paid. Obviously, CD's going to stay, and then Dak's going to be the one after this year. I think, and that's why I love Dak, but as a fan watching these preseason games, I'm looking for Trey Lance to step up. He's the guy. Cooper Rush can hold it down for games, but he's not that guy that's going to take us to the playoffs.
Right.
Trey Lance has the talent, so we just, as Cowboy fans, we hope that we see that step up in his game, and because he's mobile, he has an arm, but he's got to put it together. But he hasn't yet. So
Right. And I think you're right on your thinking unless Dak figures out a way to make it to the NFC Championship game or somehow the Cowboys make it into the Super Bowl,
oh,
right?
he'll get paid then for sure. That's
Right.
and that's
Because
the
I
one thing
think
Jerry said. It's
right.
time
And
to show
and I
you.
think that's the holdup on Jerry even trying to negotiate a contract with him right now. We got coaches on the hot seat here in the NFL too. And Mike McCarthy's one of those, right? It's what the NFL calls a lame duck coach, right? You're on the last year of your contract with no extension in sight, and you're really on a prove it this year, right? And Jerry Jones, I'm sure, is tired of winning 12 games a year, making it to the playoffs, and getting an early exit, right? The only playoff game that they've won in the last 4 or 5 years was against a beat up
Tampa Bay
Tampa
team.
Bay team, right? And ever since Jimmy Johnson built that Super Bowl championship team of the early 90s, right? Jerry Jones, ever since he fired Jimmy Johnson, has been trying to prove that he can do that it wasn't Jimmy Johnson that did that it was him that did that. And he's failed at that, right? And so I think the writing is on the wall for both Mike McCarthy and Dak Prescott. NFC Championship game is the floor of where you have to get to if you
100%.
want to be a Cowboy again next year.
100%. And he will. If Dak can make it to that NFC Championship game, and go a step farther, win the Super Bowl. Oh,
Oh,
you'll
if
get
he wins a Super Bowl, he can write his own check.
you can write 70 million. I was going to say, see 70 million. We're going to set the market, Dak. You are good. And
Right.
everyone would be very happy to have Dak as our quarterback, Super Bowl champion. And then who cares,
Yeah.
We'll
I'd be
just
sick to my stomach, but
I know that feeling because when those Eagles got theirs, man, I said, golly.
yeah. Yeah, it was always nice to have them as the only team in the NFC East that didn't have a Super Bowl. They were
I
like,
know.
they were the can you kicked around when your team was doing bad because at least they didn't have
At
that.
least, for sure. You can talk all that crap you want, but you guys don't have one. And then, that miraculous season.
Right.
And
Speaking of,
now they are the team to beat. I mean, I enjoy our 12 wins, but their roster top to bottom is the best in our
oh
conference.
yeah,
And
it's ridiculous. And then they drafted those two young corners, Cooper DeJean and
yeah, the kid
Quinyon
out
Mitchell.
Dejan. And then who's the other one?
Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo.
Yep.
And it'll be interesting to see. They got Vic Fangio as their defensive coordinator this year. So, but they're going into this season again with two brand new coordinators. Kellen Moore coming over as the offensive coordinator, and then Vic Fangio coming in as the defensive coordinator. So it'll be interesting to see. I think uh, their head coach is on the hot seat as well. If he has a weird year,
Yeah, there's a lot of turmoil going on there. And I don't know for a fact, well, not that I ever do, it's what I hear, what I see, and what we talk about. But him and Hurts seem to have this something going on that they don't even, someone was quoted the other day, like, I don't think they'll ever have dinner together. Like, yo, they'll get along for the season, but I don't think they'll ever sit down to have dinner together. And you think about that.
right,
Maybe that's where Brady and Belichick got decade after being together and couldn't stand each other. These guys are in year three.
right, right, and they haven't denied it either, right? I saw a
No.
press conference a couple of days ago, where they were showing the different clips of both Nick Sirianni and Jaden Daniels doing their separate press conference and answering those questions, and they're not running from the fact that they don't like each other, or that they've had some tension between them. I won't say that they're outright saying they don't like each other, and you could see more so in Jalen Hurts than Nick, but you could see the facial expression from him of hearing the question and just not wanting to even engage in it. And he admitted that it was something, that there was something to it, but that it wasn't there anymore, and they're living in reality, and the reality is different than what's being reported. Kind of that blanket discussion of it, but
Right.
not
And that's
denying
it.
it either
And they start off 8-2. We won't hear another word about it.
at all.
They start off
Right.
4-4, and we're gonna hear all about the problems. So and
Most definitely.
I want all the smoke. I'm ready for it. Bring
I hope it all implodes.
it. Dumpster fire all year long. Let's go.
So speaking of quarterbacks, talking about Jalen Hurts, we got a bunch of rookie quarterbacks coming in this year. And the expectation for rookie quarterbacks, I believe, is usually outlandish, right? Especially guys drafted in the early rounds. Um, especially early in the first round, like this year, we're talking with Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, 1, 2, 3. The expectation for them is they're just going to come right in and be the franchise savior. And we don't see that very often. It does happen. Caleb Stroud, yeah, last year did it, but then you have the guys like Peyton Manning who were touted, who came in and were 3-13 in their first year. The expectation in that pendulum swings, and I think it really depends on how the teams are set up. My guy Jaden Daniels, I think he'll be a huge improvement over what we've had. But it's a whole new offensive system. We still don't really have the offensive line together. I've been watching some of the preseason games, and I am not liking what I'm seeing from that offensive line. I'm not really liking what I'm seeing from the defense as of yet.
I think I looked. He was like 10 of 17 yesterday. How many drives did he get?
He got 2 drives.
Okay. So then maybe he
So
wasn't 10 of 17. Was he 10 of 12? Maybe that 17 passes seems like a lot for 2 drives.
yeah, I think it was 10 of 12. I
Okay.
think is what his final stat line was. But they only scored 3 points while he was on the field. Um, they did score a touchdown during his first game, and he did throw a really nice, like 30-yard pass to Diami Brown that was not called. He checked out of a screenplay on his own without coach's permission. Dan Quinn said, I think he instead of asking for permission, he decided it'd be best to ask for forgiveness and just did his own thing, which I think is cool, right? It shows that the quarterback understands what's going out on the field, and he trusts his eyes, and I'm okay with that, right? I just don't know how much we should really expect from him year one when we don't have a great offensive line. We're void of some talent in some places on defense, especially at corner. So I just want to see that the team improves a little bit, right? We won, what was it, 4 or 5 games last year. So if we could get to the 7 or 8 win mark, I mean, I'd love to see us compete for a wild card position or wild card. I don't see the division being in our grasp this year. I could be wrong. We'll see. Injuries and all kinds of different things could happen, and he could come out, maybe have a slow couple of games, and then just light the whole league on fire for the rest of it. But I like to curb my expectations.
I hear it. You want to be competitive.
Right.
That's that, keep him upright, keep him healthy, and be competitive.
Yeah. Really, I'm tired of being the dumpster fire that we have been. We've got the new ownership, the new coach, and now we have the new quarterback. Can we get all this put together and just look like a decent football team, right? Can we start looking like we're actually building something? I don't want the flash in the pan greatness that we've seen some of these other teams do, and then their roster gets completely shredded 2 years later because they can't afford everybody, right? I would love to see us build something like what Kansas City has, right? Where they're just competitive every year because they have the right coaches in place and the right quarterback in place. And whatever year it is, a different unit has to step up. But, there's just that cohesive team there. And so I'd like to see that we build towards that. And Jaden Daniels, from everything that I'm hearing, seems like he's that kind of leader. That's the gel that he's gonna bring to it. So I'm excited for that.
Well, it sounds like he was 83.3% completion percentage after game one. I know that was one drive, and he went 10 for 12 last game. So he's completing the passes. I'm sure it's
Right.
simplified, offense, right? Get it out of his hands quick, but that's still he's showing that he can complete passes. He had that great scramble for the touchdown week one. He's showing promise. He's showing, he is showing some promise. There's, I think there's guys in bad situations, right? Drake May, what do we really think? What do we really think is going to happen there? If they do roll him out there, he's just in a terrible situation. They're probably the worst roster in football.
By far the worst.
Rookie coach.
Yeah.
And are you really going to put the kid out there? Probably not.
I think they do, but not week one. I think Jacoby Brissett starts week one.
You got to, right? You got to give it to the veteran and let him handle this for a while.
And then maybe around Thanksgiving time, when we know the season's over with, now let's go out and get Drake May some reps. Because I think that the key here for New England with this rookie quarterback and rookie coach is we don't ruin Drake May, right? We don't Derek Carr him, or not Derek Carr, but David Carr, his brother.
Yeah.
We don't pull a David Carr where we're just getting absolutely demolished. We don't do what Sam Darnold had done to him, where he's seeing ghosts of players on the field coming after him because the blitz is just continuously getting to him, right? We don't have receivers. We don't have running backs. Our offensive line's shoddy. Let's roll out Jacoby Brissett, see if we can't win a couple of games.
And that's the smart thing, but there's people in that building that are going to remember Mac Jones' rookie year, and Mac Jones made the Pro Bowl. And there's people that are going to say, it can happen.
Yes.
And you can't let that type of thinking. It's not the same roster. It's not the same team.
It's not the same coach.
Player.
Yeah, right. And it's not the same player.
Right.
Right. Drake May didn't come from Alabama. Drake May came from North Carolina.
Yeah.
The competition that he played was different.
ACC, SEC.
Right. So, and I don't know if you've heard or not, but JJ McCarthy is done for the year.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Torn meniscus.
Heard that one. Because that kid looked good. First and only time getting on the field in an NFL jersey, man. The kid looked good. A lot of promise.
Right. And, I learned some things about JJ McCarthy during that Michigan season last year, right? Was the meditation that he does and all of these things that he does to get his mind and his body prepared for the game. And I thought he was going to be able to possibly win the starting job for week one, but I knew that he was going to be in there before the end of the season, right? I don't know that anybody truly trusts Sam Darnold to carry a team for an entire season. But we're going to have to find out now, right? And if somehow Minnesota makes the playoffs with Sam Darnold, then Kevin O'Connell is your coach of the year, right? I mean, that's the way it's going to work. But I think what JJ really needs to do, right, this year, now that he's injured, him and Michael Penix Jr., right? They're both kind of in the same situation. Although JJ's injured, Michael Penix Jr. is just kind of in a situation where he doesn't really have an opportunity to start unless there's an injury. And I think they both just need to take the time to be students of the game. Kevin O'Connell's a great offensive mind, and I can't remember the guy's name, but the offensive coordinator for Atlanta came over with Raheem Morris from the Los Angeles Rams. So he comes out of that Sean McVay coaching tree.
Zach
Right?
Robinson.
Zach Robinson, there you go. And so both of these guys are with two dudes that are known in the NFL to be great offensive minds, and so I think really your ability to become buddy with your coach. For Michael Penix Jr., it's your offensive coordinator. For JJ McCarthy, it's Kevin O'Connell, your head coach. You guys aren't going to get a lot of playing time. Penix's only playing time is going to come during practice. So here's your opportunity to get close with the coach. Hey, why are you calling this play when you see this defense? What are your expectations when we're coming out of this formation? Dial all of the mental part into it so that when it is your time, for JJ probably next year, Michael Penix, it might be 2 years, depending on how Kirk Cousins does and how the Falcons go with him as at the helm, But here's your opportunity to allow the mental time to, you can be the Jordan Love, right?
100%.
You can be
Patrick Mahomes.
right.
Said
Patrick
here.
Mahomes
Like
said
that's
it.
the remember,
Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers. These guys, the guys that you can be elite and still sit and have that year and learn from a pro.
Right.
And in great position, they're, McCarthy's in a little different situation because Darnold is kind of well traveled. It's a little different. He was, him and Penix were in interesting situations because I love their rosters.
Yeah.
Atlanta's just continuing to build. I'm amazed what their front office is doing. And they may end up laughing at all of us when this Penix thing works out.
Yeah.
And having the last laugh, because we were all laughing at them draft day. What are you doing? But JJ looked like he was going to earn that job pretty easily. Maybe they sit him out a week just to let Sam try. But the way he looked week one and everything I've heard Jim Harbaugh say about him, the things like you said I've heard from about the kid, I think he was going to get that job quickly. Penix needs an injury to get the job.
Most definitely.
But in the NFL, that happens. So here JJ's the one gets injured. He's kind of taken out of the fold. Penix, it could be a switched role where JJ was going to be playing. Penix was sitting for a couple years. It could be flipped. JJ's now out and Penix gets thrust in. But great rosters. Hopefully Penix does get that time, but I think he should be ready. I mean, I think that roster is ready to go.
And I think Penix is ready to go. He played a lot of college ball, played at two different programs. He was really good at Indiana. Injuries really hampered his stint at Indiana, and he ends up at Washington under Caleb DeBoer and really solidifies himself as a passer, right? He kind of takes a step back from the athletic quarterback, right? Because he was that in Indiana, and he really develops his passing attributes to kind of keep the wear and tear off of his body and maybe help himself stay healthy. And I really liked what he put together last year at Washington. And I think I think he's ready to go. Kirk Cousins is 36, 37 years old, coming off of an Achilles.
We're going to learn about this Achilles injuries with quarterback because I don't really remember any quarterbacks, especially in their 30s, much less later 30s with Rodgers and Cousins. We're going to learn what that's like because I'm sure their workouts have been completely different. I think Kirk Cousins has been 110%. Rodgers is 80%. And again, I'm not hating on Rodgers. I just think he knows he's good. He needs to just be able to put the uniform on, and he thinks he can sling it, right?
Yeah.
I think he has that mentality. Where I think Cousins is going to show us with a lot of rehab, a lot of work, and this is the best I can be. And then it's going to be interesting seeing how those two guys perform off this injury.
Most definitely. And the crazy thing too is they had the exact same injury and opted for two different surgical procedures to fix them. So it'll be really interesting to see how all of that plays out. And the last real big time rookie quarterback that we've got is Bo Nix. And I think he's kind of the forgotten guy. And I think that he was drafted into the only situation that was going to work for him. right? Sean Payton is the guy that's going to get the most out of Bo Nix. I'm just I'm concerned with Bo Nix because when he was at Auburn in the SEC against big time competition, he was kind of flustered and not really great. He was good, but not great. And then he goes to Oregon, with a little bit of different system, but not against his elite of talent, and he flourished. And in the NFL, everybody's elite talent. We can
Right.
talk about this guy plays like trash or this guy isn't as good as this, but the truth of the matter is the 1% of 1% makes it to the NFL, right? So every Sunday you're shooting up against elite talent. There's a reason they're doing it and we're sitting here doing this, right? Because not everybody can do what they're doing. And I've heard that he looks good in camp. He's
He did.
impressing all of the players,
He
but
has. He's gotten good reports. He's on my out of the top the rookies. He's number 3 on the list.
really,
Well, Caleb.
well, yeah,
Don't
Caleb's,
forget Caleb Williams, right? He's there. He's looked like the number 1 pick. The kid's special.
oh
He's
yeah,
shown that. He's got a great roster. Great roster. He's
yes,
he's going to be okay. Jaden Daniels, number 2. Good roster.
mm-hmm.
Um, Player's great. He's got mobile. He's dual threat. He's going to be okay. I have a feeling. And then Bo Nix, the number 3, because you think about the other ones, right? You're not Drake May, worst
Right,
roster, right?
yeah,
What happened to JJ and
and
Penix
the
is going to play.
right,
So it's your top 3 is because they're on teams at least that can compete. He's got the worst roster between the Bears and the Commanders. So he's
correct.
sitting there right at 3. He's going to get in this year at some point.
Oh, most
We
definitely.
we know it. So he's in a good situation. And
Well, and
just
he has to get in, right, for Sean Payton to show that he was right in doing what he was doing, what he did. Because say what you will about Russell Wilson, I don't know that Sean Payton really gave him an opportunity. I think Sean Payton came in with the mindset that this is not the quarterback that I want. I'm going to make it as difficult for him as I can, and then when the season's over, we're going to pay him to go away, and I'm going to get my guy. The problem is that they really played too well throughout the season and ended up with too good of a record for Sean to really get his guy. You
right.
know, I think his guy was Caleb Williams. There are reports that when Andy Reid traded up to take Pat Mahomes in that draft, he traded right in front of New Orleans, and Sean Payton was planning on taking Patrick Mahomes. So I really think Caleb Williams was the guy that Sean Payton wanted, and he had to settle for Bo Nix because that's who was available when they picked. And I don't
You
know that
think Nick starts week 1?
I almost feel like he has to.
Got no faith in Zach Wilson?
None. I have zero faith in Zach
Yeah,
Wilson
same
and
here. Just
Jared
joking.
Stidham. I mean, I have zero faith in either one of those guys. And I think Sean Payton's cocky enough and arrogant enough to say, this is the guy that I drafted and I'm going to prove to you that I can win, and so I think Bo Nix probably does start week 1. And if he doesn't, it's not very far into the season. Zach Wilson's going to blow it up quick. Jared Stidham will blow it up quick. They won't really have a choice but for Bo Nix to be the guy. And I just, he's played more snaps in college football history than any other player ever. So he's got a lot of football under his belt. He should be okay. It'll be up to Sean Payton to put him in the position to win.
Yeah, Denver's going to
To
be an
make it
interesting
six.
watch this year. Because was it Russell? Was Russell that bad? Which I think he was.
Yeah,
And was the roster that as bad as they were last year, right? And I think this year is going to be telling.
most definitely. And the truth is they traded away Jerry Jeudy, so they're down a wide receiver. So we're not even looking at an even roster with what they had last year. So it'll be interesting to see. Sean Payton's making a lot of money to make a lot of these big decisions that he's made, and how patient is the Broncos ownership with them. They're brand new in their ownership. I'm sure they want to see some return on their investment pretty quick. They paid a pretty penny to buy that team. We all saw the prices at Walmart go up when they did buy them. Now, but ownerships are very much less patient these days than, coaches back in the late 80s and early 90s when I was growing up, man, they seemed to stay forever no matter how bad they were. It was we got to give this guy an opportunity to really build his team and implement his philosophy. And nowadays, if you can't get that philosophy implemented in year one or year two, and we don't see drastic improvement, immediately, then you're gone.
Absolutely. And there's far more guys coming through the pipeline
Mm-hmm.
that are having elite changing quarterbacks, having elite seasons, offensive minds that are in the waiting, right? There's so many guys that you can go pluck. Say,
Right.
man, you really turned that team, got them to the, won their division. I'm gonna go grab this guy from the Bucks. I'm gonna get this guy from the Eagles. I'm gonna go get this guy working under Sean McVay, Shunder Shanahan. Those guys are
Yeah.
there waiting. So many, more than they used to be back in the day. There's guys that are just ready to take that opportunity. And yeah, you got to win. I mean, it's a small window these days.
Yeah. And speaking of that small window, we've got a bunch of first year head coaches. Not all of them are rookie head coaches. We do have a couple rookies. So we've got Jim Harbaugh starting off with the Chargers this year. You got Mike McDonald over there in Seattle, Brian Callahan in Tennessee, Raheem Morris in Atlanta, Antonio Pierce in Las Vegas, Dan Quinn in Washington, Gerard Mayo in New England, Dave Canales in Carolina. So we've got eight brand new
Eight brand new coaches. Three of them I feel like are doomed. They couldn't be in worse situations.
Correct.
Antonio Pierce, Brian Callahan, and Gerard Mayo.
Right.
Feel for those guys.
And so speaking of those guys, I think for them, right, success for this season is to not be a complete disaster, right? For Dave Canales, it's Bryce Young's got to look like he's making some improvement compared to what he was last year, right? I've got to see improvement in Bryce Young. I don't need you to win a lot of games. I know our roster sucks. I know, we're behind the 8 ball before the season even starts. But let me see some improvement in Young, and don't be a complete disaster with
let me see an
clock
NFL
management.
quarterback. I
Right.
need Bryce to look like an NFL quarterback.
Yeah, and then just don't look like a complete idiot with situational football and clock management, right? Same thing goes with Antonio Pierce, right? You got a halfway decent roster. I mean, you got some stars over there, Devontae Adams, Max Crosby. I mean, you've got
But
some
what's the one
dudes
thing he
over
doesn't
there.
have?
He does not have a quarterback,
He does
and they
not
weren't
have a
able
quarterback.
and they weren't able to get him a quarterback this year, right?
Right.
What I would like to see him do, and this is going to kind of come out of left field, is I'd like to see him figure out a way to trade for Hendon Hooker from the Detroit Lions, playing backup quarterback. They drafted him in the 3rd round last year out of Tennessee. He was the front runner for the Heisman Trophy until he blew his knee out. And so I think the kid can really sling it. And with some of the offensive power that they have over there, I think he would gel in nicely. But they didn't do anything to get Antonio Pierce a quarterback, right? So you've got to play good defense. I need to see that you're competitive in games, because I think Gardner Minshew should win the starting quarterback job. If anybody with any kind of brain power is running that franchise, Gardner Minshew should be the starting quarterback. He's got starts under his belt. He almost took Indianapolis to the playoffs last year after Anthony Richardson got hurt. The kid can play, right? And
He's got
Devontae
to play
Adams.
better. And I would have agreed with you before I watched the first half of the Cowboys and Raiders game. Like, for some reason, kicked off 10 o'clock Eastern last night.
Okay.
What a terrible time to start a football game. So I was
Right.
able to watch the first half before I fell asleep. I mean, terrible. He couldn't move the ball. And O'Connell, I believe their backup, O'Donnell,
Yeah.
I think his name. He came in and moved the ball a lot better. And I before last night, I would have said Minshew's job, absolutely. But he just struggled. Was just struggling to move the ball and get, but yeah, that's a problem. Either one of them. Just that's your choices, and that just sucks for Pierce.
Right. It does. So I think his end goal, until hopefully they give him enough time to actually get him a quarterback, right? But so your goal this year is to just, again, situational football, clock management, look like we're competitive in games. make sure that we're stopping people. We at least have some opportunity to win. I need a good 6 or 7 wins out of you and to look competitive. That's what I need, because I know you don't have a quarterback, right? Gerard Mayo, I think the only hope he has is to not look like an idiot in situational football and to not look like an idiot with clock management, because you have 0 good player. Matthew Judon was the best player you had on your entire roster, and you just traded him away. Like, you're not going to be competitive. You're going to be fighting with Carolina to have the #1 overall pick this year. I think one of them's picking 1 and one of them's picking 2. I would be surprised if they win 3 games this year. You know,
4 is the most I could possibly see them pulling out. It's going to be a bad season. Just keep, like you said, the situational clock management and keep Drake May healthy. Don't roll that kid out there and get him hurt. But yeah, not much expectations other than look like a professional coach, handle the press conferences like New Englanders are ready. Maybe add a little flavor to it, right? I'm sure there's that the fans would love to see some more out of their head coach at the podium, but also handle it with the Patriot way. They still want a little bit of that, I'm sure.
Gerard Mayo's just got to not try not to be Bill Belichick, right? That's all. Dude, you're not Bill Belichick. So let's not be that guy. Let's kind of move forward. I think the person with the most pressure under them is Raheem Morris. The Falcons have won 7 games, like 3 of the last 4 years. They've picked number 8 3 years in a row. And they've got a franchise quarterback. They've got a talented roster. The GM just went out and got you a pass rusher and a safety. They, signing Justin Simmons to a 1-year, $8 million contract. You have a roster. You have all of the pieces that you need. I think if they have to win their division, or it's a bust season for Raheem Morris. I'm not going to say that he's going to get fired, but I think that the expectation is that he at least delivers a division championship for the Atlanta Falcons. It's a wide open division.
Raheem is used to pressure. The first coaching gig was with the Bucks, where he took over after they won the Super Bowl with Gruden, and Gruden left. So he's used to coming in with a team with very high expectations. It's crazy to think a guy's last coaching job was 15 years ago, but he's back in the saddle. Great roster, winnable division.
Yeah.
People are expecting a lot of things, and like you said, the cupboard just keeps getting fuller and fuller. Like, hey, here's this.
What else do you need?
So
give me your grocery list.
He's in a great spot, and again, the division helps because people are picking the Bucks or the Falcons, and the Bucks are no juggernaut. That's just basically they're picking the Bucks because there's no one else. So very winnable division. I expect them to have a great year.
Yeah, and I really truly expect Atlanta to win that division. I don't know how many Monday night or Sunday night games they have, but as long as they keep Kirk Cousins away from the primetime games, he's usually pretty good. And I think Jim Harbaugh has some decently high expectations just because of his track record, right?
For sure.
Wherever he goes, he immediately turns
we almost all expect them to have double-digit wins this year. 10
and a wild card playoff berth.
Yeah.
They're not going to win the division. Kansas City's winning that division. I don't foresee that changing. San Diego, Los Angeles Chargers had some salary cap casualties this year. They lost both their star wide receivers, and so the way they play ball is going to look a little different this year, and it's probably going to take, I would say, the first 3 or 4 weeks for them to get acclimated to Jim Harbaugh football. But once they do, they're going to start rolling. So I really do.
Their roster is the only thing holding me back, because I know that they got talent, but again, you lose Keenan Allen, you lose Austin Eckler, Mike Williams coming off the injury.
Mike Williams is gone too.
Where'd he go?
The Jets. He's over there with Aaron Rodgers.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Yeah, so that's weapons. And those are guys that are studs too, not just weapons.
Right, exactly. And
so what are they going to look like offensively? I know Herbert's there, and he can, he's a baller, but
and the other deal is Harbaugh brought in Greg Roman, who has been his brother's offensive coordinator for most of his career. And so I think one of the things that'll be interesting, because I also brought in Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, that former Baltimore Ravens running backs. So Jim Harbaugh is definitely going to hit the smash mouth run first scenario. So I think it'll take some time for the Chargers to adjust to that style of football. And once they do, they'll get rolling. I do expect them to be in the playoff game, uh, in the wild card round. Um, Really,
What about your
everybody
boy
else
Dan
is
Quinn?
uh
Good roster. Y'all got a
it's
great roster. He's brought players over. Apparently, people love playing for him. He had the run
yeah,
with Atlanta, so we know we can coach. He
you
proved
know
it.
that he can coach.
He proved it in Dallas year after year with our defense. Got better every year. I think you guys got a good one. And I mean, I know you do. You know Dan Quinn can
Right.
coach.
Oh,
As long as
I
you guys keep giving him the players,
most
he'll,
definitely.
he'll be
And
fine.
I think the expectation is probably that he gets to the wild card round, like coming from ownership, like this is I don't expect you to run out and win the division. We'd like you to be competitive for a wild card spot. You have a decent roster. We brought in Cliff Kingsbury as the offensive coordinator. He's really good with the mobile type quarterbacks, the Kyler Murrays. He was Patrick Mahomes' head coach when he was in college at Texas Tech. So he knows how to coach these kind of quarterbacks, right? This is his bread and butter of who he coaches. So um, my expectation is that we win 7, 8 games. We either go 7-10 or 8-9. We have some talent on our team, but we also have some bad drafting that happened under the previous regime. You look at Emmanuel Forbes; they're talking about he could be a roster bubble. First round draft pick last year just doesn't seem to have the size or the ability to play corner in the NFL. I've heard reports, and I don't know how true these are. I've read some things here, some headlines here and there, not any actual full articles, that Jahan Dotson might be a roster bubble for us. He's not having a good camp, not able to grasp Cliff Kingsbury's offense. We did bring in Martavius Bryant, but he hasn't played NFL football in 6 or 7 years. So I don't have high expectations. I just want to see competency, right? We haven't had anybody competent at the helm of the Washington Commanders, whether it be ownership or head coaching, in quite a number of years. And so,
Yep, it's been enjoyable to watch.
yeah. But so if my team looks competent this year, I will call that a success, right? If we look like we're building on things, I don't expect us to get off to some hot start and look like we're going to make the playoffs. But if I can see us slowly throughout the year getting better, because that's not something that I've seen in probably 6 or 8 years. You know, uh, Jay Gruden was probably the last time that we had anybody competent in the organization that was in a position of being in charge. And that ended poorly, and so new ownership, new GM, and Dan Quinn is the new head coach, and all of them are proven winners in their previous stops. Josh Harris comes in from being the owner of the Philadelphia Eagles and the New Jersey Devils. He might not have won an NBA championship yet, but he's always competing for an NBA championship. Our GM just came from Adam Peters, comes from San Francisco, learning under John Lynch on how to make all of these contracts make sense and put them all together. Spent some time in New England with Bill Belichick, learning how to build a roster and all of that. And I'm sure he's going to, he has his own ideas, but he's going to garner some of that experience that he's had. And Dan Quinn did a phenomenal job in Atlanta. Every year they got better until they went to the Super Bowl, and you don't lose after being up 28-3 and it not be this black cloud over your organization and you eventually lose your job. So however that transpired, hopefully he
After that
learned from some
loss,
of that.
he was going to lose that job. No
Yeah.
one's going to hang on to a job after that. But
No.
he started over in a new place. He built something special. So he
Right.
rebuilt. That's 2 builds. And plus, he had what he had in Seattle.
Right. He's been a Super Bowl champion, right? He was the defensive coordinator for that Super Bowl championship. So
Legion
he
of
knows
Boom.
how to he knows how to win. He knows how to build a winning team. And so I have confidence that we're moving in the right direction. And that's, to me, that's the measure of success that we had this year, right? Are we moving in the right direction? From week 1 to week 17, do we look like we've built better? So,
Yeah, the only one we didn't cover, I'm just going to give 2 sentences on him real quick. So we talked about him was Mike McDonald. The thing I love about this guy, he's 36 years old.
yeah, youngest head coach in the NFL.
Crazy, right? But coming over from a proven Ravens defense, we'll see. And nobody's really expecting anything out of Seattle. So if they surprise us to make the playoffs, great. If they just miss the playoffs. So, but I just found that 36 years old, that's crazy. It just
Yeah. And he did a lot of great things with that defense in Baltimore, right? And he comes from that winning pedigree in Baltimore. So
yeah, they finished top 4 in defense and get top 4 in offense. And that's why them not making a Super Bowl run last year was so shocking because they had it all.
Right. And I think it's going to take him some time to weed around that roster. I think Pete Carroll towards the end of his run there in Seattle was making moves out of his heart and not his head, right? Guys that, he remembered from his college days, or guys that he knew from around the league, the Jamal Adams and guys like this that maybe had lost a step or were injury prone, but he thought maybe he could resurrect their career. And so I think it'll take McDonald a year or so but they have a decent roster, right? So it's not like he can't compete with what he has. And so I think that's the expectation in Seattle, right? Is compete with what you have, keep us in that wild card conversation, and take some time to build it.
Right there at 9 wins.
Yeah. So 9, 10 wins. He can call it a success. Whether they make the playoffs or not will depend on what the rest of the league does, but he'll be in that conversation. And I think that's where they'll be. He's a good coach, first time running it. So it'll definitely be interesting to see. But man, we've been on here for about 2 hours now. So I think we probably should wrap up, maybe take some time. I don't know. I picked 2 college teams against the spread and two NFL teams for week 1 against the spread. And we can do that same thing again next week. So did you make any picks?
I sure did. So I went with my college picks. I got 3. I did Oklahoma State.
Okay.
Minus 9.5 versus South Dakota State.
Okay.
Like Oklahoma State coming out week 1 and getting that W by 3 touchdowns. Notre Dame, there's a big one. Notre Dame plus 2.5 at A&M. I think Notre Dame comes out and gets that big W week 1.
Okay.
And then LSU minus 6.5 at University of Southern California.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah.
So LSU, Notre Dame, and Oklahoma State were my 3 for opening weekend.
Okay. So I took 2 college, and I went ahead and looked ahead to the NFL and took
I got
2
NFL
of those.
too.
Okay. Cool. Awesome. So I took the 2 colleges I took Georgia Tech plus 11.5 against FSU this coming weekend.
I looked at it because you're kind of with me. I think Florida State, is there a hangover from what happened last year?
Right.
But I looked at that could go the other way. They could be angry now to really, hey, we're back. So that's why I didn't touch that one because of that. They could come out gangbusters week 1,
They very well could. I look at history, right? And history says we were just talking about it, right? 28-3 with the Atlanta Falcons, and it was this dark cloud that just hung over this franchise. And I look back to a couple of years ago, UCF, right? Undefeated season, should have been, I think that might have been the BCS, or maybe it was the first couple of years of the playoff. They went undefeated and should have been playing for an opportunity to win a national title. They weren't a Power 5 conference. They weren't this, they weren't that. And they got shunned from it. And the program really never recovered from that. They went out and laid an egg the next year. A couple years later, the coach is fired, and he's on his way to Nebraska because he wants to be at a Power 5. And it kind of set the program back a little bit. And with all of the talent that Florida State's lost, plus this dark cloud of of still feeling slighted from last year, I think Georgia Tech will come out and at least give them a run for their money. I don't know that Georgia Tech wins the game, but I think that they keep it close. And then
Yeah,
the
what was
other
that
team,
spread? That was 11.5.
11.5. And then I got Colorado minus 8.5 over North Dakota State. So I think Colorado's going to come out against a lesser opponent, be able to really push them around and maybe start building some confidence to go into the meat of their season.
Sure. We're not high on the Dakotas, are we? I got, South Dakota State going down to Oklahoma State and even North Dakota State. Sorry, Dakota fans out there.
Right.
We'll look for you later in the year.
So
What you got in the NFL?
in the NFL, I've got Detroit minus 3.5. I forgot to write down who they were playing. I don't have my phone with me, but yeah, yeah. I really like what Detroit put together last year. And teaser, I have them playing in the Super Bowl this year. So I would love to see them win it. I don't know that they will, but I have Detroit making it to the Super Bowl this year. They'll be back.
Nice.
They've added a lot of good pieces through the draft and free agency, and keeping their offensive coordinator who chose not to take a head coaching job. I think creates that continuity, and I really think that they take that next step and get into their first ever Super Bowl. So
nice. Well, you got them 3.5 at home against the Rams.
There we go. Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's why I picked it. It's the rematch against Stafford and Goff. The guys that were in that trade.
The rivalry game.
Yeah. And then I took Green Bay +2 over Philadelphia. Between the turmoil that Philadelphia is going through, and I just think that Jordan Love getting paid the way that he did, the Packers showing the confidence in him, the way he came on at the end of the year last year, I really think that he's primed and ready to take a next step. And that whole team is, right. They were the youngest roster in the NFL last year, and I think that the continuity is going to be there. And they're coming off of a very surprisingly successful season last year, and I think that just built their confidence. And I think they're going to go down to Brazil and be able to beat the Philadelphia Eagles week 1.
Nice, I like that. I'm expecting big things out of Jordan Love too. I think he's gonna have a great year. So that week 1, they're in Brazil.
Yeah. First ever game in Brazil.
It wasn't on my list, but they've also got a game tonight.
Oh, really?
Against Denver. Green Bay plays Denver in Denver. New Orleans plays at San Fran. That wraps up our week. This week's preseason.
Okay.
All right, my NFL picks were, I've got Atlanta minus 2.5 at home, and this one I would put. Who knows how much money I would put on this one, because they're playing Pittsburgh. And I've watched Pittsburgh in the preseason, and I mean, I'm sorry, Pittsburgh Steelers fans, it's going to be a bad year.
Yeah.
The only hope is Russell Wilson looked terrible. Fields looked terrible. I don't think there's any way they go into Atlanta and pull out, it's hanging the game. I just don't think that they have the offense to compete. Atlanta's going to be upper 20s with points, and you're going to be struggling to get double digits.
Right.
So love that pick. Chargers minus 3 at home against the Raiders. Again, this is more picking against the opponent. The Raiders can't score points. The Chargers, I think, are going to be able to put enough points on the board week 1 against the team that's not getting first downs and moving the ball, and they eventually will, win by double digits. And then I went with a third one again, just like college, because I liked it because of the last year. Remember who played opening day last year? Kansas City and
Detroit.
And who won that game in Kansas City?
Detroit did.
Detroit. I think the Ravens, they go into Kansas City this year. They are +3. I think they go in. Kansas City's coming off getting their Super Bowl, their celebration. Ravens are sick about last year. They mean business. They come in, they get the points. They're +3. They come into Kansas City. Kansas City takes that week 1 loss at home.
Well, and they got that monster Derrick Henry in the backfield with Lamar Jackson this year.
Excited to see that for sure.
I like the pick, but I just a reminder, when Detroit went into Kansas City to win that game, Kansas City was without Chris Jones and Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce was
Yes, good
hurt.
reminder for sure. Absolutely, for sure.
So, but again, it's not a bad pick, right?
And that's
Especially
just one I like the matchup. I know what happened last year. The
right,
other two, if I'm betting the game, which I might, I'm putting maybe $10, $15 on that, but I'm betting 100 on the first two.
right.
Probably parlaying the first two. Maybe throw in that third one in a parlay just to throw like $5 to win, 400.
Most
Um,
definitely.
but those first
Um,
two I feel very confident about just
yeah,
because
no,
the
I do. I really like those first two picks. And I don't dislike the Baltimore pick, right? The thing about Lamar Jackson is he is a great regular season quarterback. He's kind of
yeah.
falling into that Dak Prescott place now where it's show me what you're going to do in the playoffs because you haven't had that playoff success yet. But in the regular season, we know that he lights it up. And having Derrick Henry in the backfield is going to be a monster that
Yeah,
I
and they
don't
had
know
him
that
last
anybody's
year.
ready for.
The Ravens had him,
Yeah,
and I know that they're sick about it. They're coming in
most
hungry. It's
definitely.
going to be a hard-nosed game, and you got one team that just won a Super Bowl, and the other that wants it so bad, to prove it. So I just can see that them winning that week one, that battle. May not win it in playoff come January, but that week one, somebody's a little bit more hungry, and that's the
Yeah.
Ravens.
Most definitely. Well, I think that's going to be a wrap on our preview show. We've got
It's not a
actual
bad week
college.
one preview show right there.
No, no, not bad at all. We will sign off for this week, and then next week we'll have actual college football that we'll get to discuss for a little bit. And
Yeah, and I'll be able to connect with you. I'll be out in the ocean on
cruise
a
in.
cruise, so maybe I get to give you some good vibes.
Yeah, some island vibes. You guys
That's
going to the
right.
islands?
Yeah, the ABC Islands.
Awesome. Nice, nice.